Well, welcome to Convocations. I'm Dr. Eric Freeman, and today we have Robert Behunin, who is going to speak with us. A little about Robert. After completing his PhD in medieval and Renaissance literature, Rob spent a career in higher education as a faculty member and administrator, overseeing multiple university programs, distance education, innovation, campus development, technology transfer, spin-out companies, marketing, communication, a lot of different things. After leaving higher education and before joining GWC Capital, where he works now, Rob was the director of Utah Government Public Affairs and an R&R Partners working with public officials there, policymakers, donors, investors, government funding entities, and the private sector, to create necessary alignment to deliver the expected outcomes. And now as a division manager for business services at GWC Capital, Rob oversees public and government affairs, marketing, branding, public relations, market analysis, and lifestyle management for GWC. He's, however, a rural boy at heart. He has citizenship both in Wayne County and in Iron County. And I really like this about his bio. He has schnauzers, Welsh Corgis, 2 goats, and 100 or more wild turkeys living around his house, along with the horned owls, which I assume he does not own. But and on occasion, you may see also Rob playing the bagpipes, which scares the turkeys, but it attracts the geese. And so without further ado, Rob Behunin.
Eric, we didn't test the mic, but I guess it works because I can hear myself now. That might be a really bad thing. Well, thank you all for coming. It's really, really great to be here. I'm honored, I'm flattered to visit with you, engage with you, and to convocate, right? When you put it in that context, it doesn't sound like a very nice word, but we are here to convocate. I would be really remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank the Dean of the College of Humanities, Cheryl Borguero, Eric, Dr. Freeman, President McKiff, my great friend, Cameron Brooks, my great friend, for having me here, for asking me to serve on the foundation board, which I just thoroughly enjoy. And for today's presentation, if this is a total flop, I introduce them so you can blame them. Don't blame me. They brought me here, which I'm glad to be here. So convocation is really an interesting word, and sometimes I think we just dismiss it. I was talking with McKenna, one of our English majors, back here the other day. Oh, and just by the way, I met some people I already know. I know Ms. Leidsman there. I went to school with her grandpa. How old does that make me, right? Ms. Roop right here from Vernal. And I've done some work with her uncle, Scott Roop, who works for State Institutional Trust Lands. So it's good to be amongst family. And I'll get to that in a second. All right, convocation. Think about that word for a second. 2 parts. Con, from the Latin with, or together, and vocation, which actually means, comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call. So this is a calling together. Literally, that's what that word means. And if you think about things that get called together to do important things, just think about the convocation of cardinals. When a pope dies, they go into convocation, they go into conclave, and they reason together and they make some very, very important decisions, like who's going to be the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, right? So when I was telling Eric this before, in the old days, convocation was not an option. In fact, I remember the days when it was a requirement. You remember that, President? It was a requirement to go to convocation. Then it became a class, and then it became an option, and here's where we are today. But I am just delighted that you all decided to come today and listen to me. Some of you asked about my tie. So this is my family tartan. This is the Behunin Bohannon tartan. And as I told a couple of you before, I was going to wear my full dress kilt. I was going to start off by playing my bagpipes. but due to an injury on these two fingers, I still am going through some physical therapy to get this one to work, so maybe I'll have to come back and do that for you. But the left hand doesn't work really well, and it would have done more than just scare away the turkeys. It would have scared away all of you. I promise you that. So bear with me on that. I wear the tartan because I feel like I'm among family. And as much as we talk about convocation, we talk about a gathering of the clans. Have you heard that before? And usually the Scottish clans got together to go into battle, right? And fight against the English and those sorts of things. But they also gathered in their convocation and their gathering to get together as family and friends and talk about the things that are important that are going on in their community and in their lives. And this is a piece of fabric, right? And to me, this piece of fabric represents three important qualities: heritage, tradition, and history. Very important qualities to me, but also really important qualities to Snow College, which is unique. I would submit to you, Snow College is really more than unique in the educational marketplace, and it embodies those three traditions to me. All right. So who am I really? Really, I mean, I'm nobody. I'm just a kid whose family's from Wayne County, as Eric mentioned, who grew up in Cedar City, and who has a really funny last name. And most people can't even pronounce it. They go, Rob, and then I know they're talking about me. That's what happens. Am I going to get a laugh out of you guys? Right? Oh, there you are. Good. Thank you. Super. And I attribute this strange name and pronunciation. I get it pronounced differently all over the state. If you're in Wayne County, I get introduced by my cousin Dennis Blackburn, who's a county commissioner there. He says, "Oh, this is Rob Behunin." And I asked him one day, well, why do you say Behunin? He was like, well, your grandpa was a sheep herder, Frank, that was Frank. And so we just figured he was Behunin. So we call him Behunin. Well, that makes sense to me. You might as well, make that connection. When I ran for student body office at Cedar High School, which I graduated from in 1982, and I can say that because I've got Ms. Leidsman back there, family, her grandpa's just as old as I am. I ran on the platform, be human, vote for Behunin, right? And I dressed up in a big green gorilla costume, and I handed out bananas. Oh, that politics could be that easy today, right? And I actually won. I was the boys rep at Cedar High School. Somebody asked me yesterday what my connection was to Snow College. And I want to show you this because I learned this morning. And in fact, I learned it and then I bumped into Cam. This is a plaque right outside this center here. I think it's this way, probably. And it's on a little brick monument, and I want you to look at it. This is a plaque that says, in 1852, Isaac Behunin and family came to Pine Creek and settled Ephraim. How about that? I got a monument to my great-great-grandfather on the campus of Snow College. That's my connection. And I knew he came to Pine Creek. I didn't realize, as I did a little more research this morning, that he built his house, he had his family, he brought others, and the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers Memorial goes on to talk about that. So beyond just the personal connections here, hey, President, I got a family plaque on the campus. You're stuck with me. How about that, if that's okay? A couple other quick things about my family in this area, right? If you go to Capitol Reef, you're going to bump into the Elijah Cutler Behunin cabin at the end of the national park there. And Isaac Behunin, after he left Ephraim, went and built another house in 1863, if I'm not mistaken. He built a home in Zion Canyon where the lodge is. His cabin's not there anymore, his homestead's not there anymore, but he's the one that named Zion Zion. In fact, there's still a Behunin Canyon that you can go hike I used to do it when I was a kid, and you didn't have to have a permit. Now you got to have a permit, right? So anyway, I say all of this to you because I'm just an ordinary farm boy with the red sand of southern Utah coursing through his veins. Really nothing too special. All right, couple more data points. My father was a contractor. My mother was a bank teller. I already told you I graduated from Cedar High and went to SUU, got a degree in English and Spanish. I'm a first-generation college attender and graduate in my family. I did a master's and PhD in medieval and Renaissance literature. I ended up being a full professor at 2 different universities. And as Eric said, I was in higher education administration for 20 years, some of it at SUU, some of it at Utah State University, some of it in Vernal, out there with the Roops, building a campus, which was a whole lot of fun. And I've had the opportunity as a humanities guy. I mean, I'm a guy who teaches Shakespeare and Chaucer and, reads poetry, I write poetry, I play the piano. I'm a 16-year piano student. And obviously, I play the bagpipes when my fingers work. But I got the opportunity at Utah State to be a vice president over advancement, fundraising, and commercialization. And that commercialization piece was really fascinating because I got to spin out these companies at big research universities, even in at great small colleges like Snow College. Professors, faculty, staff even, and students, they create amazing inventions, some really cool stuff. Some of it's life-changing in what they do. I got an opportunity at Utah State to spin those out into companies, right? To take them into the private sector. And just to highlight a couple of things that we did. Of course, aerospace at Utah State is big. Space Dynamics Lab, it's huge. At one point, we put more experiments in outer space on the space shuttle and other missions than any other higher education institution in the country. I think MIT and Johns Hopkins are ahead of us now. But it was amazing, the things that we got to do and the companies that came out of that. We commercialized a water technology that takes really nasty water. And Ms. Roop, we did this in Vernal. All of that oil and gas, all those oil wells pumping, produce a lot of nasty water. What do you do with that water? We live in a desert. The Great Salt Lake's drying up, right? So we developed a technology to take that really nasty water and turn it into drinking water. And that company today was sold to a group called Swire. They own Swire Coca-Cola, but they also own a bunch of other companies. They're the largest family office and the oldest family office on the planet. They started in Queen Victoria's time, and they're in England. And they bought the technology. They're using it all over the world. That was a lot of fun. And there were some other battery technologies and other sorts of things. But the companies we spun out today are still making millions of dollars. And they're employing people. They're employing students, right? They're employing faculty. And they're doing good in their communities. So after leaving Utah State, I kind of tried to retire. I just wanted to go live in Spain for 3 months out of the year. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Maybe I'll come live in Ephraim 3 months of the year. That would even be better. I was asked to join a government and public affairs firm called R&R Partners, and you only know them for one thing. They created this phrase, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's who they are. They're pretty smart people. And when the Los Angeles Raiders wanted to move from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, they hired R&R Partners to say, go build us $1 billion stadium called Allegiant Stadium, and let's have the Super Bowl there. That's what these guys do. And I got to associate with that group, and I learned a ton, you know. And in all the board meetings and everything, I was always quoting Shakespeare. Shakespeare, you can find a spot to weave him in anywhere. That was a really great experience. And today I'm with GWC Capital, which is part of Clyde Companies. I saw a Sun Pro truck They do lumber and building supplies. They were delivering a bunch of stuff to the new Ephraim temple that's being built here. So Clyde Companies, the folks that I work for, we are in quite a few places. If you've ever been to St. George and you've been to Desert Color, that development down there, that's a project I've been working on for the last 8 years. And 2 years ago, GWC Capital bought into Nordic Valley Ski Resort. And last 2 Mondays ago, our barn burned down, right? So I got to be all over the news explaining what's happening and why the barn burned down, okay? So those are some of the fun things that I get to do. So to get into the real meat and potatoes here of what I want to talk to you about, I want to delight and instruct a little bit. I want to provoke, maybe tease a little. As you can tell, I'm a big tease. But I want to open your eyes, I want to open your hearts, I want to open your minds, and demonstrate to you that the humanities more than just a good tool in your toolkit, that it really is, in today's nomenclature and the way we talk about things, it is a laser. And anybody who has a liberal arts education and has humanities behind them is really laser focused and can make a huge difference in this world. All right, so are you ready for this? Everybody still good? Great. All right, so quickly here, framing the humanities for our times. 4 things I want to talk to you about. I just came across this list. So you see it on TikTok, you see it on Yahoo Money, you see it in a lot of different places. But this came out from a group called EdSmart, and they just published their 20 most useless degrees in 2023. 13 of them are in the humanities. Could be more, depending on how you classify them. And decidedly, there's lots of problems with this list when I look at it. And it really makes me aggravated. It makes me sad, too. And as a humanities-trained person, I'm trained to ask the question, why? Why this list? We could spend hours picking this apart, talking about what's wrong with it. But as a liberal arts and a humanities-trained person, we're taught to deal with these things and to ask the questions, well, why? What happened? And I want to submit this to you as a major point. That what you get here when you have this education at Snow College is you learn these things. So that when you are presented with what we call tendentious interpretations, like this list, which is a tendentious interpretation or comment is one that promotes a particular cause or a particular point of view that is particularly controversial, right? There's lots of facets to it. That when you see this stuff, you're trained, you know, to ask the question, why? And to even object and say, wait a minute, that's not right, right? That's not right. Just like Convocation and Eric and I were talking about, we want to promote inquiry. We want you asking questions. We know you're smart. We know you have what it takes. And again, when I look at this list, my brain says, my Scottish brogue kicks in and I say, are you daft? Right? Are you thick as a plank? I mean, come on, people. I can show you, and I'm sure the president and others could as well, that these degrees are not useless in 2023, or weren't. They're not going to be useless in 2024, or 2025, or 2026, right? In fact, I know a once upon a time single mom who has a master's degree in English, who went into software sales and has made over $120,000 a year, probably for the last 5 years. Last year, she cracked 170. Is she using her English degree, humanities degree? You bet she is. Absolutely she is. I was telling the president, we had to pay some archaeologists and anthropologists a whole lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to do an environmental study for us. That's not small potatoes. If you're evaluating your degree from a monetary standpoint, right? If you think it's about the money, but it's so much more than just about the money. So I would submit to you, none of those degrees are useless, right? Communications, Miss Roop came from Vernal to Snow College to do communications. It's going to be a fabulous degree, and you're going to find something really, really meaningful to do with it. So this is my first major point. The first pillar in my frame here is get all the knowledge you can and experience all that you can. And that's Snow College's promise to you, right? Get a good education, get the experience, get a path forward, and oh, by the way, you can do it without debt. Okay? Know enough and learn enough so you know when to ask the elegant question, the beautiful question, and to object if you need to. That's my first major point. Okay. I'm going to let that simmer for just a little bit. The second piece, since it's football season, let's just shift gears just to show you how nimble I am. Super Bowl's coming up, right? We love Badger football. We love all of Badger athletics, but Super Bowl is coming, so I thought I would give you this what I call the great experiment. It's December 20th, 1980, and that day will live in infamy in NFL history. The Jets are playing the Miami Dolphins, and the game is it's not controversial. It's a nothing burger. In fact, the networks who were obligated to televise it, NBC, was really worried that they were going to get nobody watching because it wasn't worth anything. It didn't affect the playoffs. It was just nothing. So they thought, well, what can we do to make everybody watch this game? So the president and CEO, Don Ohlmeyer, said, I've really been tired of listening to Howard Cosell. Some of you are too young for Howard Cosell. And the announcers that announce the games, they talk too much, they're too chatty, they tell jokes. Let's try a game that has no announcer. Let's take the human element out of the game. Can you imagine a soccer game without that guy going, score, or go? I mean, come on, right? But they did. They took the announcer out of the game. Bryant Gumbel. You all know who Bryant Gumbel is, right? If not, I'll show you a picture in just a second. Took him out, and they had this great experiment. Did they get better ratings? Oh, yeah, they did, because everybody wanted to see what it was like. Overall, it was a total flop. Here are some of the comments. This game became a game with no context, played by men with no pasts. Thought that was interesting. No context, no past. And then another comment was very similar. There was no context, no history to appreciate the human drama on the field. Interesting. We have our history professor right here who can vouch for that, right, Eric? It was nothing, I love this one from somebody else. It was nothing more than moving wallpaper with padded humanoids clanking heads. Isn't that great? Without an announcer. I mean, when I watch football, I love those announcers. They bring the drama. They create the tension. They create all the things that we enjoy. Humor, history, rising action, climax, denouement, right? Really important. So Bryant Gumbel, here's his picture now. One of America's most celebrated broadcast journalists, right? He said this about the game. He knew it was a mistake. Here's what he said. At the end of the first half, the Jets decided to go for a touchdown, right? And they would get a lead that they would never surrender instead of trying a field goal, okay? But nobody was there to say that, okay? And he said, the whole thing lacked a degree of drama because unless somebody was there to say it, and what would they need to say? All right, here's the situation, here's what's going to happen. Now we're going to shut up and watch. Okay? So Couple of points going on here. My next 2 points in framing how the humanities fit into what we're doing. First of all, you heard that humans create context. We create history, right? We need that. Goethe, a dusty old German writer and philosopher, he said this: a person who does not know the history of the last 3,000 years wanders in the darkness of ignorance, unable to make sense of the reality around him. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, it's a cliche. It's true that you will repeat history if you don't know history. If you're not able to challenge history and reshape history, you risk being handed a narrative not of your own making or not of who you are. You need to know history. It's important. So that creates context for you. Second major point, and you heard Brian Gumbel mention this, he said, we're going to say a lot of things and then we're just going to shut up. We're just going to be quiet and let it happen. Okay? Classical pianist Arthur Schnabel said, when I play the piano, I handle the notes just as well as anybody else. But it's the pauses between the notes. That's where the art resides, is in the pauses. Okay? Wayne Dyer, who's a fairly famous author, said it's the space between everything. Space between where everything is created. It's that moment there. In creative writing, we call it the frozen moment, right? In the humanities, we study the things, but we pay special attention to the spaces between the things. Some people would call this reading between the lines, right? But it's what we do. And it's what sharpens and hones your skills so you can ask the questions why, so you can object, and you just don't take things passively, right? Are you with me? I see some nods. Great. Man in the cap right there said, yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so what about this space between? I want to share with you a little poem that a friend of mine wrote, because this space between is really important. And I talked a lot about this with our humanities students and faculty yesterday. Here's to the place in between the sunrise and the morning, between the midnight and the full moon. That place where all the naming and doing, where all the talking and listening, where all the lying and truth-saying, where all the storytelling and singing, where all the words themselves slide into quiet. Just between the dream say and the real say of it all, to the place they call home. You know why some of you came from Harriman or from Lehigh to Snow College? Because it's the place between. You can innovate here. I'm not saying you can't do that at the University of Utah. I think you can do it better here because it is the place between. It's where creativity happens. It's where magic happens. A lot of big businesses go on retreats, right? They say, let's pack up everybody. Let's go on a retreat. Let's get away from the hustle and bustle, and let's go sit and innovate and make our business better. What are they looking for? The space between. You found it. You've got it right here. Don't lose that chance. There's real value when you pull yourself out, your mind out, and your intellect out of the flow and noise and chatter, and you move into that creative slipstream. You need to know how to do that. In business, we call it thinking out of the box, right? Get away from the things that you're doing. Get away from just the notes. Focus on the pauses. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, so we still doing good on time, Eric? All right. I want to take you for the last pillar then, to the final frontier, because I'm a total space cadet, so we're going to get there. All right, so at GWC today, this is our brand essence. I got to write this, right? Me, the Shakespeare guy, the humanities guy. He said, we need to come up with a vision statement and a brand essence of who we are. So here's who we are at GWC Capital. And every employee has bought off on this. We want to do a higher standard of development. And a higher standard of development is an art and a science. Okay? That's important. It's really important because that's the opportunity to have that balance. And the final frontier, I think for us in education, is a blending of those things. We can't have one without the other. People are saying, oh, you got to do business and you don't need to do humanities if you're doing business. And that's just, to me, that's just so much, as my granddad used to say, hogwash. Okay? All right. It's important that we look to that. So it's a higher standard of development. It's an art and a science that is driven, look at these next three things. It is driven by a continuous cycle of relationship building, creativity, and discipline. Two of those three things are based in the humanities. We have to have good financial discipline. We have to have good sustainability. We have to make sure our processes are right, the mechanics. But what we do largely, what I do every day, is relationship building. And that's important. And you have to have those humanistic skills. And you have to have that liberal education to do that. It's important. And then our final goal is we want to produce sustainable community assets that we can enjoy in producing them and that we can share with others for generations. So I would submit to you our company's brand essence in a very important business in this state has the humanities written all over it. Okay, more to my point here. Have you seen the movie Contact? Two of the older crowd. None of you young people have ever seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster? Don't be embarrassed, okay? Assignment, Eric, watch Contact. All right, that's the next assignment. I'm going to come back and check on you and bring my bagpipes. Blow them in your ear if you don't. Okay, so in this show, it's based on Carl Sagan's book, Contact. In this show, Jodie Foster is an astrophysicist who is really fringy astrophysicist. She's like, looking for ET on radio telescopes. And she's a devout atheist. She nearly misses her chance when she gets a signal from outer space that instructs her how to build this machine to take a human to another part of space to have first contact with aliens or whatever, right? And so, she's transported through some time warps and everything, and she almost ends up not going, but then by stranger fortune, she ends up going. And so you can see her in the top quadrant there getting into the little machine. And remember, this is a scientist going to explore outer space to record and bring back and tell everybody what she saw. And I want to just play this. It's about 2 minutes. This is a clip. I want to play this for you, and I want you to take note of what happens to her, what she says. So this is right as she's coming out of the wormhole. You ready? It's loud.
It's a triple, no, quadruple system. It's beautiful. They're alive. Another wormhole! This one's much more violent! some celestial event. No. No words. No words to describe poetry. They should have said the poem. So beautiful. Beautiful. So beautiful. So beautiful. I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea.
Okay. Did you hear what she said? Here's a scientist going to explore a brave new world, and the language of science fails. She says, poetry. They should have sent a poet. No words. I had no idea. Science can't answer all the questions. The humanities can't answer all the questions. But isn't it interesting that science got her there, light years away from her home? And actually in the show, the recording that she was making, she had a little headset on, you didn't see it there, it didn't work either. And so her exclamation of, we should have sent a poet to come back and describe to us how beautiful it was. Isn't that interesting? I would submit to you, as I conclude here, I'm going to wrap it up, that we need this blend of art and science. It's so important. Let me just run through quickly the first 3 points that I talked about today. Get all the knowledge you can so that you know how to answer or ask the elegant questions. Learn history. Understand the context of who and what you are. Look for the pauses between the things. Look for the space between. Focus on that while you're here. And then this last one, quote from Albert Einstein, the great scientist, right? Find the balance between art and science. So here's what Einstein said. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. And this from a scientist, the guy who invented E equals mc squared, right? Theory of relativity. It's the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder or marvel is as good as dead, and their eyes are dimmed. That's your fourth point. Find the balance between art and science. Don't forget to wonder. Here's a poem I wrote for you guys, just for you. And I'm going to end this, and this is all I'm going to say. Not going to tie it up in a pretty bow. This is it. This is my conclusion. Sometimes in this world, there is not enough silence, but right here, yeah, even right here at Snow College, in this brief transient of blended existence, where sky and shadow erupt in violent splendor, and memories and dreams collide, I am silence's eager guest. Content between the extremities, my soul rises to the unclouded moon, where nothing at all needs saying. Thank you for having me here. You guys have been great. Look forward to doing more with you as we continue our journey at Snow College. So thanks again.
So it looks like we have about 5 minutes for questions. So why don't you just take maybe 10 seconds or so here to think of a question you might want to ask, and then raise your hand once you feel ready to ask the question.
It was either that good or that bad. Come on, guys.
Why
made you go from teaching college classes to wanting to be in the field of business?
I don't know that I would say I actually wanted to. That was not my idea. It wasn't my path. I took, as I told the group yesterday, I took the road less traveled. I was firmly on a path to being an English professor, and then I got an opportunity to do distance education. I got an opportunity to work with legislators, and I kept taking the opportunities in front of me. But I just didn't go out and say, I'm going to do this and this only. I left my options open, and I kept looking for those spaces in between and the opportunities. So my path is a weird one. I mean, yeah, I get asked all the time. You mean, I go into a meeting, I went into a meeting 2 days ago, and they're like, I handed my business card, and they're like, oh, well, what's your PhD in? And this is a business meeting, and I said, medieval and Renaissance literature. And they go, oh, wow, what are you doing here, right? But Ms. Roop, I can read, I can write, I can be educated on things I don't know, and that's what the humanities did for me, and that's why I am where I am. That make sense? Okay, great. Who else? You're such a good-looking group. Yeah, Ken.
What's the number one skill you think you've taken from your education that has made you successful in your career?
Yeah, this is going to sound cliched, but I have learned, I think, really well critical thinking, but I've learned how to ask what I call the elegant question. My kids will tell you, they used to call me 20-question dad. You know, they'd come and everybody was fighting or whatever, and the problem, and we would just sit down and I'd say, well, let me ask a question. And now when I do that, they just go, oh, right? I would ask them questions until they came to their own answer, right? And I've learned that in business negotiations and other sorts of things. Sometimes I have hostile landowners that don't want to let us, put a pipeline across their property or something. And if I can understand what their problem is by asking questions, more than trying to position and say where I am, it's one of our great critical thinking skills. Listening, finding the pause, and then asking the questions. Does that make sense? Cool.
Okay, I have a question. So you talked about how humanities in your major allowed you to connect with a lot of different areas and expertise. I was wondering if other majors like theater and music could have the same opportunity as humanities as well, or have a different kind of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what I forgot to tell you, anybody want to guess what Bryant Gumbel's degree was in? Anybody want to guess? I'll give you $50 if you guess. No, good guess though. Russian literature. Go look it up, it's on Wikipedia. He's a Russian literature major at Bates University, I think. Anyway, so yeah, McKenna, I know people who have studied English and gone on to be doctors, right? There are CEOs of company who were music majors, right? And back to the 20 useless degrees, they're not useless, right? It's you that creates the value behind the piece of paper. It's who you are. Piece of paper is not magic, is it, President? It's like, oh, I got a business degree from Harvard, so you have to pay me a lot of money. I'll tell you right out, that's crap. That might help get you your first job, but if you don't perform, forget it. And I have a very good friend, and McKenna knows this, from Goldman Sachs, who hired 20 humanities graduates into Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest private equity investment firms in the country. And why do they like art history majors and music majors and English majors? It's because of these critical thinking skills. And you've learned to see things differently with a liberal arts education. Does that make sense? Okay.
That brings us right to
All right.
some time. other people have classes, but if you wanted to ask Rob any other questions afterwards, or if you need to talk to me, feel free to hang around for just a little bit. All right, thank you again.